The writing in Game of Thrones Season 8 is pretty awful. They stopped using the core principles that made the show great in the earlier seasons, the dialogue lost most of its fire, and the once strong characters haven't stayed true to themselves. Now, everyone and their mother have been bashing Season 8, so I'm willing to play devil's advocate for a bit and attempt to defend Season 8. The bad writing is unavoidable, but I think the closing season has its moments. There were some incredible performances. The direction and overall cinematography was jaw-dropping at times. And we finally got the reunion we've all been waiting for. You can complain all you want about how bad the writing is, but I don't think you can say Season 8 is bad television. Now, I think there was something great in every episode, so I'm just going to go from episode to episode. That being said, we're going to start with episode 1. And with episode 1, we had the scene with the Umber Boy. Now, the first thing of note in this scene is the lighting. I'm going to take a shot in the dark and guess that that fire is digital and not real fire. However, they did a really good job of making it look real and allowing it to illuminate the characters' faces. It gives the scene a very warm feel, which isn't typical for a horror scene like we're about to find out, but I think this whole scene is trying to lull you into a false sense of security. They're trying to put it in your head that the Umber Boy is dead and that this is just a sign from the Night King. That is, until we find out that the boy is undead. This shot right here is setting us up for the scare. Now, the focus on Tormund is very harsh. The background behind him is very blurred, so if you're not really paying attention, you might not notice the boy's eyes opening.
If the horses last, we'll get there before the dead. We just have to hope the Night King doesn't come first.
This frame is just awesomeness. Just the detail in the Umber Boy's makeup and what I'm assuming are fake body parts pinned on the wall. And then you have the sound effects where I have absolutely no idea how they got those sounds. It's all just so incredibly well done. For episode 2, we had the scene with Jaime knighting Brienne.
Kneel, Lady Brienne.
And I think we might have actually got a spark of good writing in this episode, because this is kind of like a character development piece between Brienne and Jaime. I know everybody was complaining about Jaime's character arc, and I actually think this did a big thing for Jaime as a character. Where he started as, kind of an arrogant prick, he ended up grateful and knighting the person that saved his life. And then on Brienne's side, we feel like she's finally getting recognized for all of her awesomeness. And of course, the direction in this scene was immaculate. I love how Brienne's first reaction is kind of a scoff. I think it's meant to remind us about the story she told about the dance she had when she was younger. Now, Gwendoline Christie's acting in this scene is nothing short of amazing. This little look she gives Jaime says everything that's happening internally. It's incredibly subtle, but it's also incredibly expressive. And then we have this little slow zoom that is another incredibly subtle thing, but it's almost as if the camera is magnifying Gwendoline Christie's performance. And the tone of Jaime's voice in this scene also kind of suggests that there's something a little more going on here than just him knighting her. As we find out later, he's kind of falling in love with her. Well, that might be taking it a step too far. It's kind of left ambiguous as to whether or not he has true feelings for her. But we can see from this scene that there's something truly happening internally with Jaime. It's really another great performance in this sequence. And then we have this frame where it kind of looks like this could be like one of those great classic paintings. It's a great example of blocking and composition. I gotta be honest with you, I thought this episode was absolutely amazing. Yes, the episode is dark, but we gotta talk about that for a second. First, you gotta consider what medium you're watching this on. If you streamed it, then it was likely blotchy. This is because for a video to be uploaded through the internet in real time, aka streaming, it has to be a relatively small file size. See, when they render these episodes, the files are going to be gigantic. I can't give you any specific numbers, but it has to at least be double-digit gigabytes. And honestly, more probably, it's in 3-digit gigabytes. So for these episodes to be streamed through Amazon or HBO, they have to make the files incredibly smaller. And the way these encoding programs work is they find pixels that are alike and they just kind of smush them together. And that's why this episode in particular does look blotchy if you're streaming it. I'd say 90% of the time this kind of encoding is not noticeable. It just so happens that this kind of encoding does not work very well with dark episodes, and I think that was a big oversight on the editor, the director, and so on. But I can imagine this is going to look incredible on Blu-ray. Anyway, moving on from that. So first we have the Red Woman lighting the trench on fire. They use a lot of fast cuts and extreme close-ups to show what's going on with the Red Woman. And while that's happening, you can kind of see the fear in her eyes, and you can also hear it in her voice. I think this is the first time we've really seen this character express fear, and it hits hard. It makes for a very intense, quick sequence. And then we have what I think is my favorite send-off in this episode, with Lyanna Mormont killing the giant. It's just poetic and overall badass. And oh, that's pretty. This scene with Arya sneaking around, I hope I'm not the only one, but this really reminded me of playing Skyrim. There's a lot of great camera work that goes into this scene, but I think one of the most notable things about this is that there's no music, and it kind of makes you want to hold your breath during this scene. It makes a suspenseful atmosphere. Then at the end of the episode, we have this sequence that kind of reminds me of the last episode of season 6. The audio is mostly just music with very minimal sound effects. And if anything, I think this shows some incredible editing. It almost feels as like the music and what's going on screen are dancing with each other. And at the very end, we have the death of Jorah, which was very emotional. And then, of course, the Red Woman's death. And I think having a wide shot with her kind of stumbling out of the center of the frame was a stroke of genius, really. I think overall, episode 3 is really one of my favorite episodes of television ever. I mean, how many times have we ever gotten an hour-and-a-half long battle, basically? Yeah, we didn't really get as much about the Night King that we wanted, but I think that was really my only problem with this episode. I thought Arya killing the Night King was awesome. I mean, I think we all kind of expected Jon Snow and the Night King to have a showdown, but I don't think Game of Thrones has ever been the kind of show to give you what you expect. And here, it didn't really feel like they were subverting expectations in a bad way. They kind of do that later in the season, as I'm sure you know, but for this episode, I was cool with it. In episode 4, we had Tyrion's monologue, and that's it. Like, that's really all that was good in that episode.
They hate you, and you hate them.
Perhaps the most obvious thing in episode 5 was the Clegane Ball. First, I'd like to point out a bit of the visual poetry that's going on here. They're fighting on a staircase and the Hound's under him, so the Hound is literally fighting an uphill battle. Insert mountain pun here. The world is practically ending around them, yet all they care about is killing each other. And then we get some great choreography once the Hound finally starts swinging. His swings are broad and heavy, almost like he's swinging himself off balance. This is the choreography reflecting that this is an emotional battle. This has gone wrong before. Then the Hound ends the fight really the only way possible, tackling him into a giant pit of fire. And to do that, he has to kind of overcome his fear of fire, which is a trope that's been done before, but hey, it's a good send-off compared to some of the other send-offs. And yes, we have the last episode of Game of Thrones, the ever so rushed finale. But there were some actually really awesome scenes in this episode. I think we can all agree that the scene with Tyrion finding Jaime and Cersei under the rocks was quite the outstanding performance. He doesn't overact this. We see crying scenes go wrong so many times because actors overact or underact. But Peter Dinklage hits the sweet spot. And honestly, he's hit the sweet spot throughout this whole show, really. His acting through the whole show has been quite the thing. He's won an Emmy for it, and I think he really deserves it. And then the back and forth between these 5 was great. It reminded me of why I liked the show in the first place. Now, I've never really considered Kit Harington to be that great of an actor. He doesn't really get to show off any of his acting during the show because Jon Snow as the character really doesn't require much dramatic emotional acting. But we actually got a scene where Kit Harington got to show off his emotional acting a little bit. After Arya tells him what she's going to do, he makes this face that is so expressive. It shows what's happening internally, is that he's sad to see everyone go, but you know, he's proud of his sisters. That whole scene was really pulling on my heartstrings. That's it. That's all I've got to say about Season 8 of Game of Thrones. Could it have been better? Yes, absolutely. Could it have been worse? Yes, absolutely as well. Honestly, at one point, I just started to shut my brain off and appreciate the great direction and cinematography. The show was much more enjoyable that way, which is not how it should be, but great direction always deserves some credit. So this was the second ever Cutaway video, so thank you for watching. I put a lot of work into this, you know, creating the music and writing everything and doing the editing. So if you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing, consider liking the video, and so on. So until next time.
Pretty well, little brother.